So we're now in the bribing children phase of the hostile government takeover. And it's sending Caroline Leavitt and Stephen Miller into total crash out mode. Remember when we used to warn kids about strangers and unmarked vans offering them candy? Don't take it, we'd tell them. They're trying to lure you somewhere dangerous. Well, now the government is the one in the van. Except instead of handing out candy, they're offering straight cash. And instead of luring kids away from safety, they're paying them to go back into violence that they fled from. An internal federal notice obtained by CBS News reveals that the U.S. government is now offering immigrant teenagers significant money to give up their legal representation and leave the country, not as adults, but as children, kids as young as 14. And the amount they're offering? More than they're paying adults to leave. This is an effort to buy away the rights of the most vulnerable children in America. But before examining this policy itself, it's worth observing how the White House is responding to the press coverage of what is very true.
If the courts allow you to ultimately send in the National Guard into Chicago and Portland, do Democrats not have reason to be concerned that there are long-term plans by this administration to keep U.S. military or the National Guard in American cities, like what we're seeing here in Washington?
Why should they be concerned about the federal government offering help to make their cities a safer place? They should be concerned about this. They should be concerned about the fact that people in their cities right now are being gunned down every single night. And the president, all he's trying to do is fix it. And there has been a complete smear campaign by the Democrats and the media, quite frankly. I was reading Political Playbook this morning, one of the most inside the Beltway newsletters you can find. And you guys are framing this like the president wants to take over the American cities with the military. The president wants to help these local leaders who have been completely ineffective in securing their own cities. And we have already seen there's a positive formula for that. Look at Washington, D.C. The murder rate has declined significantly. Our streets are safer. People who live here feel safer. All of you in this room, I know you do, you just won't admit it. And it's a proven system that works, and the president wants to make America's cities safe again. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Michael.
Thank you, Caroline. Two questions, if I may.
Because the mayor wants them. Michael.
These talks in Egypt. If Hamas...
Caroline Leavitt is throwing a fit because journalists are reporting facts. When the government's defense of a policy is attacking the press they're covering, it shows that they know how really, really bad this is. And she's not the only one crashing out. Watch what happens when Trump's senior advisor, Stephen Miller, gets asked if these policies are an attack on people of color.
You know it, and I know it.
So that's not exactly a no, Stephen. Can you just unequivocally state that the immigration policy... I
said it's a dumb question. Okay.
Well, I appreciate that. But
and it's a dumb question.
So no, this policy is not designed to...
I thought when I said it was a dumb question, it meant no.
Well, I just want to be clear and precise. I appreciate you trying to qualify my questions, but nevertheless, I think it's a fair one that a lot of people have.
My full answer is no, that is a lie, and it's a dumb question. But you said something else speaking to the...
Notice how the reporter stays completely calm while Miller loses it. Notice the language. The blacks? That's who's crafting these policies? That's who's deciding which children get targeted? When somebody asks if your policy is racist and your response is to have a meltdown and then use 1950s racial terminology, notes are taken, Stephen Miller. But Stephen Miller doesn't stop there. Watch him double down, pivoting to attack none other than trans people and liberals and announcing his plan to reshape what American children are allowed to learn about our corrupt government.
Children will be taught to love America. Children will be taught to be patriots. Children will be taught civic values for schools that want federal taxpayer funding. So as we close the Department of Education and we provide funding to states, we are going to make sure that these funds are not being used to promote communist ideology. For any nation to be successful, it cannot teach its children to hate themselves and to hate their country. So these are a few of the areas in which President Trump has fought the cancerous, communist, woke culture that was destroying this country, where we were led to believe that men were women, that women were men, that racial discrimination was good, that merit was bad, and that safety and physical security mattered less than the feelings of liberal ideologues.
We're going to teach children to be patriots as they close the Department of Education. We're not going to allow the teachings of children to include woke culture. They're going to fight it, calling it communist and cancerous While they're bribing immigrant children to disappear, cutting the Department of Education, they're also ripping away our history and removing and allowing us to not even talk about in our education system racism and injustice. And they call any opposition woke or communist. And they're dismantling institutions that might possibly teach children the truth about what's happening, targeting all children and what they're allowed to know. Because if you can control what children learn, you can hide the horror of what you, Stephen Miller, are doing to other children. The same authoritarian project is making some children disappear and ensuring the children who remain don't learn enough to question it. But there's one more thing you need to see from Mr. Miller. Watch what happens when he's asked about the violence he claims to justify all of this.
I don't know of many Democratic politicians who have endorsed these terrible incidences that you just referred to. And I also don't know of any evidence that there's some kind of vast underlying organization funding them. Is that what you're indicating is happening here?
Yes, in fact, we know that it's true. But obviously...
You think Tyler Robinson was being funded by some terrorist organization?
No, what I said was that you asked whether there was some larger criminal conspiracy relating to domestic terrorism in this country. And I said, yes, there absolutely is. Now, of course, Antifa has been designated as a domestic terrorist organization. This is only one example of many in which we have, it's typically a continuum of violence. It involves both organized doxing, it involves violent threats and intimidation, it involves explicit calls to commit violence against a targeted person, and then that tends to escalate into physically violent and obstructive acts.
I don't know of many Democratic politicians who have endorsed these terrible incidents. I also don't know of evidence that there's a vast organization like Antifa funding them. Stephen Miller, we know that it's true. We know that it's true. No evidence. On September 25th, the administration rolled out a policy naming George Soros and Reid Hoffman as terror funders with zero evidence. Meanwhile, FBI data shows that 92% of 2024 domestic terror deaths came from right-wing attacks. 2 weeks after Charlie Kirk's assassination on September 10th, no shooter ideology had been found, yet ICE's budget ballooned 308% increase to target left networks. Democracy Forward's July 11th lawsuit exposed Miller's shadow coordination with far-right groups, precisely the networks he claims to be fighting. This is the bald white man behind the policy. He blames Antifa with zero evidence, and he names funders without proof. He ignores all the right-wing violence, and he coordinates with the same extremists that he pretends to oppose. And now he's offering children money to disappear, which brings us to where we are today. The Department of Homeland Security is offering immigrant teenagers $2,500 to voluntarily return to their home countries. Adults receive only $1,000. So why do children get more? Well, because they have stronger legal protections that are harder to circumvent. Under federal law, unaccompanied children from Central America cannot be quickly deported. They have the right to immigration court, hearings, asylum applications, and legal representation. The administration is paying extra to convince vulnerable teenagers and children alone in shelters without any lawyers, without anyone explaining what they're giving up, to waive rights Congress created specifically to protect them. Mexican children do not qualify for the $2,500 because they can already be deported quickly. This bribe targets only the kids without protections the administration wants eliminated. Through the payment, it requires an immigration judge's approval and only comes after the child arrives in their country of origin. The reality is simple. A scared 14-year-old gets offered $2,500 to sign papers without a lawyer explaining why they might qualify for asylum, or that this is money that won't keep you safe when you return to an area with gang violence or domestic abuse. This is not a choice that the child is equipped to make. The administration has simultaneously made legitimate paths out of shelters harder by restricting sponsors, especially undocumented relatives, from taking custody of said children. Kids end up staying in facilities longer, more desperate and more isolated. Then somebody with cash arrives, and ICE agents also perform welfare checks on children released to sponsors. But these aren't wellness visits, they're enforcement operations hunting even the kids who made it out. Attorney Melissa Admonson says clearly that dangling money before vulnerable children distorts this process and could endanger their lives. A 15-year-old who fled gang recruitment doesn't become safe because the U.S. gives him $2,500. Return to exactly what they escaped. Except now the gangs know that they tried to leave. Now they're marked, and $2,500 doesn't last very long. In late August, the administration attempted to deport more than 70 Guatemalan children, claiming their families requested their return. The children were on planes when a federal judge blocked the deportation. A Guatemalan government report revealed that none of the parents had actually requested their return. The administration was prepared to forcibly deport children against their parents' wishes. When forced deportations failed, they decided to buy them instead. The administration cannot legally deport these children quickly, so they are burying away their rights. They target the most vulnerable children in this country with their financial incentives to abandon legal protections that might save their lives. And remember Miller's promise to close the Department of Education and teach these children to be patriots instead of teaching them about injustice. This is exactly why. Because if you can bribe some children to disappear and control the remaining children and what they learn, you can hide what you're doing. You can make some kids vanish altogether, and you can make sure that the others don't learn enough to care. And if you've enjoyed this video, I'm going to ask you to take a moment to subscribe, share it with somebody who needs to know about this injustice that's going on, that Stephen Miller and Caroline Leavitt are working so hard to bury. I am Loren P across all social platforms, and I hope to stay connected with you. Leave us a comment and let us know what you want to hear more of next.